England in the 1840s wore its manners like polished armor. Every smile hid a calculation, and every marriage was measured by advantage before affection. Behind the tall doors of Aylesbury Court, silence ruled more strictly than any law of the crown. The Duke of Aylesbury lived there as though the house itself had been shaped to match his nature, cold, controlled, and distant from all warmth. Edmund Hawthorne was only 24, yet people spoke of him as if he were far older. He dressed in dark coats, spoke little, and showed no interest in the pleasures that filled the lives of other young noblemen. Ballrooms bored him, conversations tired him. Women, especially, were subjects he avoided with practiced ease. His estate was vast, rich with history and land, but it felt empty, as though laughter had been shut out years ago and never allowed to return. Pressure followed him wherever he turned. Advisers sent letters sealed with careful words that carried firm commands. His guardians reminded him that a duke without a wife was a problem waiting to grow. The crown itself made its wishes known, and those wishes were not gentle suggestions. Edmund read every letter with a calm face, then burned many of them without reply. He did not wish to share his ordered life with anyone. A wife would expect kindness, conversation, and affection. These were things he did not believe he possessed. Still, the crown was not a force he could ignore forever. And so a decision was made without his consent. Rosamond Belfair arrived at Aylesbury Court on a gray afternoon. The sky hung low, and the grand stone house rose before her like a judgment already passed. She stepped from the carriage with only a modest trunk and a calm she had learned through hardship. At 23, her beauty was quiet but striking. Not the kind that demanded attention, but the kind that stayed in the mind once noticed. Her father's debts had stripped her of comfort and protection, yet they had not taken her dignity. Servants watched her with careful curiosity. They knew their master well, and sensed what kind of welcome awaited her. Still, they offered what kindness they could through softened expressions and gentle guidance through the entrance hall. When Edmund Hawthorne descended the staircase, the air seemed to tighten. He moved with the certainty of a man accustomed to obedience. His eyes passed over Rosamond with cool distance, and he offered no greeting. Before she could speak, before she could even gather her thoughts, his voice cut through the hall. "I will never love you," he said, firm and flat. "Pack your things and leave." The words echoed against stone and marble. A hush fell over the servants. One maid turned her face away. A footman lowered his eyes. Rosamond felt the heat of humiliation rise, but she did not beg or protest. She held herself straight, dipped a proper curtsy, and said she would leave before dawn. Her voice did not tremble, though her heart did. She turned and walked toward the guest corridor, each step measured and controlled. Behind her, the house seemed colder than before. Evening settled over Aylesbury Court, bringing with it a deep stillness. Rosamond could not bring herself to retire without thanking those who had shown her small kindness. She slipped into the servants' kitchen and asked, quietly and politely, if she might prepare something for them. They agreed, surprised but grateful. She cooked a simple pheasant dish using recipes her mother had taught her long ago. As the food warmed, the kitchen filled with a rich and comforting scent unlike anything the estate had known in years. Servants paused in their work, drawn by the fragrance and the calm presence of the young woman who had been dismissed so cruelly. Edmund, restless and unsettled for reasons he refused to name, wandered the lower halls. The scent reached him and stirred a curiosity he did not expect. He entered the kitchen without announcement and accepted a small portion from a footman. The first taste stopped him. The flavors were careful and deep, balanced with a skill that spoke of patience and heart. Something shifted within him, sharp and sudden. He demanded to know who had prepared the dish. When the answer came, the room fell silent. "Miss Belfair." Edmund said nothing more. He left the kitchen, but his thoughts followed him, turning over truths he did not wish to face. Rosamond, unaware of the effect she had caused, returned to her chamber and prepared for departure, believing she would leave no mark behind. Before dawn, Edmund rose with a sense of unease he could not explain. He told himself the roads were unsafe from the night's rain. That was the reason he intercepted Rosamond as she descended the stairs with her trunk. He ordered her to remain until conditions improved. His voice was firm, but something beneath it was strained. Rosamond accepted with polite confusion. The servants welcomed her continued stay with quiet warmth, and whispers soon followed. London gossip moved quickly, and rumors wrapped her name in speculation she had never invited. Edmund ignored the talk, but he watched her from a distance, noticing how the house changed around her. She spoke kindly to servants, thanked them for small acts, and treated everyone with equal respect. The halls felt less hollow. Edmund found reasons to cross her path, to speak a few careful words, and each time he walked away unsettled. One afternoon she baked bread for the staff. Edmund entered under a weak excuse and commented on the warmth she brought into the house. The word surprised them both. Preparations soon began for a formal banquet to host a visiting prince. Edmund, against all expectation, suggested that Rosamond assist in planning the meal. The household reacted with disbelief, but no one questioned him aloud. As Rosamond worked with the kitchen staff, her quiet confidence earned their respect. Edmund's attention followed her more closely than he admitted. This did not go unnoticed by Lady Beatrice, a noblewoman with clear ambitions. Her smiles toward Rosamond were sharp, her words edged with insult. Rosamond endured them with grace, though each remark cut deeply. Edmund watched, torn between expectation and an emotion he did not yet understand. On the eve of the banquet, the house hummed with tension and anticipation. Something had shifted within Aylesbury Court. Edmund felt it. Rosamond felt it. Neither yet understood what it would demand of them when morning came. The morning of the banquet arrived, wrapped in quiet urgency. Aylesbury Court stirred earlier than usual. Servants moving through corridors with focused steps, polishing brass, pressing linens, and preparing every corner of the house for noble inspection. The air carried both excitement and strain, the kind that settled before important events when no mistake could be forgiven. Rosamond rose before the bells rang. She dressed simply, choosing calm over display, and tied her hair back with care. Though she told herself she was only a guest fulfilling a task, she felt the weight of the day press upon her chest. The banquet was not only for a visiting prince, but a test of her place in a house that had never truly welcomed her. She spent the early hours in the kitchen. Pots simmered. Knives moved with steady rhythm. The servants followed her instructions with trust they rarely offered outsiders. She listened to their thoughts, adjusted plans, and praised their efforts. There was no command in her voice, only respect. It drew loyalty without demand. Edmund watched from a distance, more often than he meant to. He told himself it was his duty as host. Still, his gaze followed her movements with an attention that unsettled him. The way she worked brought warmth into the cold stone rooms. She did not rush, yet nothing fell behind. Her presence made order feel gentle instead of strict. As the sun climbed higher, Lady Beatrice made herself visible. She arrived, dressed in silk and confidence, walking the halls as if she already belonged there. Her eyes followed Rosamond with thinly veiled disdain. "You seem very comfortable here," she remarked lightly, though her tone carried judgment. "One might forget you were invited only by circumstance." Rosamond met her gaze calmly. "Comfort comes from kindness, not position." Lady Beatrice smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "Be careful," she said softly. "This house does not reward misplaced hope." Edmund witnessed the exchange from across the room. Something sharp stirred within him. He did not intervene, and that silence would soon weigh heavily on him. By afternoon the estate stood ready. Chandeliers gleamed. The long tables shone beneath candlelight, prepared in advance. When the prince arrived, formality swept through the house like a tide. Edmund greeted his guest with practiced grace, his face composed, his posture flawless. Rosamond remained near the edges, guiding the kitchen and ensuring every dish left in perfect order. When the first course was served, murmurs of approval followed. The prince paused after tasting the soup, surprise bright in his expression. He praised the balance of flavors, the restraint, the care. Course after course followed, each met with approval. Whispers spread among the guests. The prince asked who had designed the meal. Edmund felt an unexpected tightening in his chest. He gestured for Rosamond to step forward. She hesitated, then moved with measured steps into the light. Her gown was modest, her hands steady. She answered the prince's questions with humility, crediting the kitchen staff and tradition over herself. The prince's admiration was clear, his smile lingering longer than courtesy required. Edmund watched closely. Something unfamiliar stirred within him, sharp and unwelcome. Jealousy. When Rosamond stepped back into the shadows, the warmth of the room seemed to leave with her. Edmund could not focus on conversation. His thoughts returned again and again to her calm presence, her soft voice, the way the prince had looked at her. The evening ended with applause and satisfaction. The prince retired, pleased, and the guests drifted into smaller conversations. Edmund sought Rosamond in the quieter corridors beyond the hall. He found her in the garden, lantern light soft against the night air. Magnolia blossoms glowed pale above them. She stood still, drawing in a breath of cool air as if grounding herself. "You should not hide your gifts," Edmund said, surprising himself with the honesty in his voice. "Tonight would have failed without you." She lowered her eyes. "I only wish to do my part." "That is what troubles me," he replied. "You give without expectation." She looked at him then, truly, and for a moment the space between them felt fragile and alive. Before she could speak, Lady Beatrice appeared, her presence sharp against the quiet. She remarked pointedly on impropriety, on gossip, on appearances. Her words carried poison wrapped in silk. Edmund hesitated. That moment of silence cut deeper than his first rejection. Rosamond stepped back, her expression closing like a door. She offered a formal curtsy. "I will not cause trouble," she said softly, then turned and left. Edmund stood frozen. The warmth of the garden faded. That night Rosamond sat alone in her chamber. Her belongings lay neatly arranged, as if preparing for departure. She replayed the evening in her mind, the near confession, the silence that followed. She understood too well what it meant. Affection hidden was still a form of rejection. She decided to leave at dawn. Edmund did not sleep. Regret pressed heavily against him. By morning, dread filled his chest. He moved through the halls without composure, calling her name too late. Rosamond crossed the entrance hall into pale morning light, trunk in hand. Edmund followed, urgency stripping him of pride. Outside, near the gates, she waited as the carriage was prepared. He reached her at last, breath unsteady. "Do not leave because of my failure," he said. She turned, her eyes calm but wounded. "I cannot stay where silence speaks louder than care." He knelt before her, the damp grass darkening his coat. The gesture shocked her. "I love you," he said simply, "not for what you do, but for who you are." The world seemed to still. Rosamond's grip on her trunk loosened. She searched his face for certainty. "If I stay," she said, "it must be without shadows." He rose and took her hands. "Then we will face the light together." The gates of Aylesbury Court stood open behind them, waiting for a choice that would change everything. The morning air felt different after Edmund spoke the words she never expected to hear. Rosamond stood still. The world narrowed to the sound of her own breath and the weight of his hands holding hers. For years she had learned to rely on herself alone. Love, especially from a man like him, had never been part of her future. Yet the sincerity in his eyes unsettled every defense she had built. She did not answer at once. She needed truth, not poetry. "You are a duke," she said quietly. "Your world does not forgive easily. Yesterday you were silent when I needed you. Today you kneel. Tomorrow the world will speak again. I will not survive being chosen only in private." Edmund did not release her hands. "I was taught that control was strength," he said. That silence kept order. You have shown me how wrong that belief was. I cannot promise the world will be kind, but I promise I will not be silent again." Behind them, servants watched without moving. No one spoke. They sensed that this moment did not belong to rank or routine, but to two people standing at a crossing they could not undo. Rosamond studied his face, searching for hesitation. She found none. Slowly she nodded. "Then I will stay," she said, "but I stay as myself, not hidden, not protected by distance." A quiet breath left Edmund's chest, one he had not known he was holding. He stood, still holding her hands, and for the first time in many years, the rigid weight he carried seemed to lift. News spread quickly. Within days, whispers turned into headlines. Papers spoke of scandal and disbelief. A duke claimed by a woman of fallen fortune. Aylesbury Court named as a house undone by sentiment. Some mocked, others speculated. Lady Beatrice withdrew with thin smiles and wounded pride, her ambitions collapsing under public rejection. Edmund answered none of it with anger. He addressed the household directly, standing beside Rosamond in the great hall. He spoke clearly and without apology. "She is my chosen partner," he said. "She stands beside me by right of character, not permission." The servants listened in silence, many with softened eyes. They had already chosen her long before. Life at Aylesbury Court changed in small but lasting ways. Laughter returned to corridors that had only known footsteps. Meals became gatherings rather than obligations. Edmund still worked with discipline, but warmth entered his voice. Rosamond walked freely through the house, no longer an uncertain guest, but not yet a duchess either. She remained herself, and that steadiness earned respect far more deeply than title ever could. Edmund learned, slowly, how to speak when silence tempted him. He defended her openly. When gossip reached the gates, he met it head-on. Each act of support built trust, fragile at first, then strong. Their engagement was announced without spectacle. Some nobles declined invitations, others came out of curiosity. A few came out of quiet admiration for courage they did not possess themselves. The wedding was modest by noble standards, but rich in meaning. Candles lined the small chapel. Rose petals softened the stone aisle. The choir sang with gentle devotion rather than grandeur. When Rosamond entered, Edmund did not see society's judgment or expectation. He saw the woman who had warmed his house and broken his walls without force. When they spoke their vows, the words were simple and true. Outside the chapel, the air felt lighter. The future remained uncertain, but it no longer felt empty. As they walked hand in hand back toward Aylesbury Court, servants gathered along the path. Some smiled openly, others bowed with genuine respect. The house itself seemed to breathe differently, as if long-held tension had finally eased. That evening, as the sun lowered behind the hills, Edmund and Rosamond stood at the windows of their shared home. The same halls that once echoed with silence now carried warmth. What began with rejection had ended in choice. And for the first time, Aylesbury Court felt alive.